What if your mind is not entirely your own, but shared at its deepest level with every human being who has ever lived? Ancient cultures separated by entire oceans, with no possible historical contact, no shared language, no way of ever exchanging ideas, somehow produced remarkably similar stories. A great flood that destroys and renews the world, a wise old figure who guides the hero through darkness, a descent into an underworld followed by a genuine transformative return. Carl Jung noticed this pattern early in his career and built one of his most significant and most debated theoretical contributions directly around trying to explain it. Jung called this shared, universal layer of the mind the collective unconscious, and he distinguished it carefully from the personal unconscious, the layer containing each individual's own specific, private, repressed material and forgotten memories. The collective unconscious, in Jung's understanding, is not built from any individual's personal experience at all. It is inherited, present in every human being from birth, containing universal patterns Jung called archetypes: the hero, the wise old figure, the great mother, the trickster, the shadow patterns that appear in recognizable form across virtually every human culture and every historical era, regardless of whether these cultures ever had any actual contact with one another. Jung arrived at this theory partly through his own clinical observation, noticing that his patients, including patients with no education in mythology whatsoever, frequently produced dream imagery and fantasy materials that closely mirrored specific mythological themes from cultures they had never studied and could not have consciously known about. He also arrived at it through extensive comparative study of mythology, religion, and folklore across radically different cultures, finding the same basic story structures and the same basic symbolic figures appearing again and again, with a consistency Jung considered too precise to be explained by simple historical borrowing or coincidence alone. This explains why certain stories move us so powerfully, regardless of our own specific cultural background, and why a story from an entirely unfamiliar culture can still feel strangely, immediately recognizable the first time you encounter it. According to Jung's understanding, you are not simply appreciating an interesting story from outside your own experience. You are recognizing a pattern that already exists within your own psyche, inherited rather than learned, activated by a story that happens to express this universal pattern clearly and powerfully. Here is what makes this theory genuinely useful in practical everyday terms, regardless of where you personally land on its more contested scientific claims. Archetypal patterns, according to Jung's understanding, do not remain confined to ancient myths and distant cultures. They continue operating within your own individual psyche today, shaping your dreams, your fantasies, and even your waking everyday reactions to other people and to significant life events. When you encounter someone who seems to embody genuine wisdom beyond their years, you may be responding in part to the archetype of the wise old figure being activated by this specific person. When you face a genuinely difficult period requiring real courage and transformation, you may find yourself, often without conscious intention, actually living out the basic structure of the hero's journey, a call to adventure, genuine trials and difficulties, and eventually a real transformative return. Jung believed that recognizing these archetypal patterns operating in your own life offers genuine practical value, since a person going through a difficult period who can recognize the hero's journey structure underneath their own specific struggle gains real perspective, understanding that genuine trials are a necessary and expected part of this universal pattern, rather than evidence that something has gone uniquely wrong in their own particular life. This does not diminish the real difficulty of what you are actually experiencing. It offers a genuine, larger context, connecting your own individual struggle to a pattern that every human culture has recognized and told stories about since the very beginning of recorded history. There is a second equally practical application worth understanding. Jung believed that archetypal energy, when it remains entirely unconscious and unrecognized, tends to express itself in less controlled, sometimes genuinely destructive ways, individuals or entire movements becoming unconsciously possessed by a specific archetype, a leader unconsciously embodying the hero or the great father in ways that produce genuine harm when this identification remains completely unconscious and unexamined. Jung considered conscious recognition of archetypal patterns in both yourself and in the wider world around you, a genuine form of psychological protection, allowing you to engage with these powerful universal patterns consciously rather than being unconsciously swept along by them. If you have ever felt an unexplainable, powerful pull toward a particular story, myth, or symbol from a culture entirely unfamiliar to your own background, hear this clearly. According to Jung's understanding, this pull is not simply aesthetic appreciation of something foreign and interesting. It is a genuine recognition of a pattern that already exists within your own psyche, shared with every human being who has ever lived, activated by a story powerful enough to make this universal, inherited pattern suddenly, vividly visible. Think honestly about the myth, story, or symbol that has moved you most powerfully, regardless of its cultural origin, and consider what specific archetypal pattern it might actually be expressing, and where that same pattern might currently be active in your own real, ongoing life. Right below the single word for the archetype you suspect is most active in your own life right now. Naming it honestly is the real and practical way you begin engaging consciously with a universal pattern Jung believed operates in every human life, rather than being unconsciously carried along by it without ever fully recognizing what is actually happening. Because the powerful pull certain stories and symbols exert over you was never, according to Carl Jung's understanding, simple appreciation of something unfamiliar and foreign. It was genuine recognition of a pattern already living within your own psyche, shared at the deepest level with every human being who has ever told a story or dreamed a dream.